What's going on, guys? Got another video for you here today. We'll be as quick as possible with it, but I kind of wanted to go over the basics of crafting and when you should try to craft and when you should just try to go buy the item from the market. And we'll go over a little bit about how to buy and search and stuff like that. We'll do a quick little recap just in case you're unaware of how to go search for the items that you're looking for. But we'll go ahead and dive right in, and I've kind of separated this into two sections: early game and or crafting in general. Just kind of, you'll use these throughout the entirety of the game, whether you're crafting or selling or whatever. And then the end game currency that you won't use unless you're crafting high tier items and really kind of know what you're doing, right? So the first thing I'd like to get into is when I typically craft and when I typically buy. And I would say early on, when the league first starts, I'm going to craft more items, just because it's more simple, right? And the reason being is these essences right here. Early on in the league, when I first start my character, I try to add as many essences to the map as possible, and this is how I craft my early game and maybe some mid game items, right? And that's how, maybe I drop like a basic wand or something, and I can slap on a cold damage or a spell damage essence, and then we're just hoping for maybe one or two other mods that are useful for us, and then we can move on, right? And so these are going to be your best form of early game crafting. Next, when you get to mid game, this is essentially when I typically buy more items, because the fact of the matter is you're going to need an item with 3 or 4 lines on it that are useful to you by this point, right? Like, getting away with 1 line of damage isn't going to be enough by the time you get to mid game, which is what I consider, yellow and white maps, maybe kind of trickling into red maps. That would be mid game in my eyes, right? So at this point, I'm going to be purchasing more items because I'm like, okay, I just need some life and some resistances and maybe some accuracy, right? So the chances of me hitting those with any of the crafting methods that I have available in the mid game are going to make it far more expensive than just going and spending 10 chaos or something like that to just buy a ring or whatever it is that you're looking for, right? So, and then when you get to the end game, when you're really, you've got currency to burn and really craft something dope, this is when it transfers back to being more lucrative to craft the item yourself than to go out and buy it, right? So you're not going to get, for instance, let's say this bow. I crafted this bow, and to go out and buy this, you're probably looking at, I don't know, maybe 15 to 20 divines would be my guess. I mean, we can price check it. It might not be the easiest to price check, but let's just see with these 3 things. So 14 divine with just those 3 modifiers, right? Let's see if you add a 4th modifier, it's about the same. So we'll say that the bow is worth 15 divine. This cost me about 6 or 7 to craft, right? So it cost me about half the price, but I also know what I'm doing. So there is a difference there, right? So there is a breaking point where if you know what you're doing, you can potentially craft your item for much cheaper than going out and buying it. However, sometimes these things are not easy to craft, and there's a reason why they cost so much. But that's kind of the flow of how it works for me. Really, really early on, I do some crafting. Mid game, it's very minimal, and I try to go buy the items that I need to hold me over to the end game items that I would like to craft. And then once we get into end game, I usually give myself, for instance, once I was in end game with this character, I crafted a bow that was okay. It was good enough to keep me in red maps. Then I crafted another bow that was good enough to beat the bosses and stuff like that. And then thirdly, for my end game bows, I crafted this one, and now it's this is where we are, and this is probably the bow that I'll finish with. All right, let me sell this, and then we'll go to D&D mode. Sorry, boys, happens every time, but I also need the currency, so. And this actually is a particular case where I used this ring for quite a while until I was able to go out and purchase. I did purchase this. I did not craft this one because it just simply had other things on it that I needed. So this is a situation where I went and actually bought an item that I needed to find, 5 lines that were exactly what I needed, when, originally I was using a unique that gave me cover enemies in ash, which is nice, and we missed that a little bit, but we got a lot more out of this ring. So now let's go to D&D, put these away. So getting back into it now. That's where we are. Sorry, lost my train of thought. So now I want to go over a couple items of what things that I would always craft and things that I would probably always go and buy, right? And I love crafting in this game. So I crafted this chest. I went out and bought a spell suppress fractured item, and then I crafted the rest on this, and now with um, uh, the tattoos, you're a little starved for attributes, so I wanted a little bit of attributes, a little resist, life, armor, and evasion, so this is exactly what I wanted. I ended up crafting this. You'd probably end up paying a pretty penny for something like this. We'll see if we can search this. So let's see. We have spell suppression, life, Ellie res, and then the armor and whatnot. So 7 divines, right? And this cost me probably 3 divines to craft, right? This one, same thing. I bought the base with the fractured modifier on it, and then I did the rest with attack speed essences, right? So I just keep hitting attack speed. I wanted damage with bows, and then a flat damage of lightning or cold. So once I had that, then that was good for me, and this could probably be crafted a little bit better, but et cetera, right? This amulet, I actually ended up crafting a +1 all fire skill gems for it was, I don't know, maybe 3 divine. I wanted to go in. I wanted the +1 all skill, but it is not an easy thing to do. It's expensive, and I just wanted it. I had the money, so I went and bought this for some 20 divine or something like that. So even though I prefer to craft, and ideally that's what I do, there are times where I go out and buy things as well, right? So this is crafted just because I needed the mana efficiency, and then this is purchase, right? So there's a number of different things. When in some leagues I might craft my gloves and not my helmet, or whatever the case may be, right? So it does depend on what you're looking for and how specific things need to be. If you need lots of specific mods on something, you might be better off going and purchasing it. If you can kind of get away with just a couple things, then you might be okay buying it. And that's kind of probably the most difficult part about crafting for items that you're going to use. Is it going to be a better idea to craft it or to purchase it? And you'll have to kind of play that by ear and base it off of your odds. You'll have to do a little bit of research, things like that, right? So what I do want to get into is just kind of how we use the basic currency and a couple things you might craft on your own. Something that I almost always craft on my own is my cluster jewels. They're very simple, they're not difficult to hit, and with each one, the large are the most difficult, then medium, then small are fairly easy. So these are ones that I almost never buy. I almost always craft my own because you can get something very usable fairly simply, right? And it's cheap to craft these, right? You essentially only need the beginner currency of Orb of Transmutation, right? So let's scour this off. Oh, here's a good beginner currency too. So now it's completely clear, right? And now what we're going to do is we're just going to start hitting it we hit it with this Orb of Transmutation, and then we go to the Orb of Alteration, right? And this will keep it as a magic item. Okay, so we just rolled and we're like, oh, we have a double damage mod. Now we want to throw an Orb of Augmentation, which will just add another modifier, right? And we're like, oh, no, we don't want that. We want to try to get a 3 mod item. So we're just, and Chaos Res is good. But again, we want to keep going. So we're just going to keep, and I won't end up crafting unless this hits in the next couple, which it probably won't. But you're just going to cycle through and wait to see the things that you like, right? And we're like, oh, okay, we really like... Let's see, let's get one that we really like, kind of. So let's say hypothetically it's going to give us an actual mod at some point, right? Right, okay, there we go. So there's the double damage. We hit this and we're like, oh, 25% increase effect. We like that. Now we're going to regal it, right? Which will turn it into a rare. And we're like, oh, okay, now we have intelligence. This is what we want. And ideally, that would be for your first one, you're going to keep going until you hit 3. Let's see if I have one. No. So here's one here, right? So this would be one that we hit 3 passives that we want, right? Large passives, whatever you would call them. And so this is where this would be our stopping point early on, and we could use this, right? It's 8 passive, and it's got all the things that we want on it, or at least some things that we can use for now. And this is not a very expensive thing to craft, especially early game. You will absolutely overpay when the leagues first start to get something like this, even if it's not even super desirable mods. So there are certain items in the game that you're almost always going to want to craft yourself, at least, until you need something very, very, very specific at the end of the end game where maybe you have a little currency and stuff like that, right? So that's an easy way to do that. And again, it gets easier with medium and even easier with small, because you're on medium, you're looking for 2, and on small, you're looking for 1, right? So the next thing I think people really like to do is they like to chaos spam, which, let me tell you now, I did this a lot early on. Do not chaos spam. It is a huge waste. The amount of money, or the item that you will end up getting for, let's say, 50 to 100 chaos, and you're like, oh, this is pretty nice. Chances are you could probably have gone and bought it for 10. And it's just, chaos spamming is not an effective way to roll items, and it's chaos. Like, it is in the name of the currency. So you want to make sure that you spend your chaos to buy items. Don't re-roll things with chaos. That would be my recommendation. I'd made that mistake for a really long time early on, where it was like, I just want to see what happens. Don't see what happens. It's just a huge waste of currency. And all it does is, as you can see, it just randomly rolls it into anything, right? Like, and so, yeah, maybe you get a couple nice rolls on there, but otherwise, it's going to be completely random, right? So you're much better off going in and being like, dude, I need let's see, I need lightning resistance, right? So we're going to hit this with a lightning, and we're like, oh, okay, we got a little lightning damage, some energy shield, and a really low lightning resistance, right? So, because this is for lightning damage, not for lightning resistance on a ring. So that's my mistake. Other jewelry, you get lightning damage. So again, we actually got lightning resistance too. I was just wondering why it was so low. But again, now we have a lightning damage ring, and that was what we were looking for. So this will work nicely for a little while, right? But in the end, either you're going to spend a lot trying to roll with lightning mod or lightning essence, and keep trying to hit what you're trying to hit. So there's double lightning accuracy. You're like, perfect. I'm an attack-based build. This is a great start. Then what you can do is go in. Obviously, you have a crafting bench, and you can craft whatever items you may need on it. This is one of the big ones. So there you have a ring that is very serviceable for a lightning attack damage build right off the rip, right? Maybe it's got a little bit of life on it, whatever the case is, okay? So as you can see, our result was much better and much faster when we used an essence as opposed to spam. We spammed 9 chaos on that thing, and there was not a single usable ring that popped up, right? And then lastly, another thing that I craft a lot of is belts, right? The belt is a fairly easy thing to craft. Why? And this will trickle into when you should decide to craft and when not to. The belts do not have a ton of available mods, right? There's not a huge plethora of a pool of mods that can hit on a belt. They're fairly standard, and there's not very many. So this is one where we're like, okay, every belt you want life or ES, depending on what you are, and resistances, right? So belts are fairly easy to craft, high tier belts, and even make currency on it. You can go buy these bases. Maybe you've been farming up essences, and you can actually just go buy some of these and just start hitting them with essences. And as you can see, this is guaranteeing us lightning resistance, and we can just keep hitting until we hit something that is suitable for us, right? So here's a cold resistance one. Right? So as you can see already, the rolls aren't good, but you already have a life, fire, and a cold resistance belt.
So we hit this again. Look, there's huge life, cold, lightning, mana flask recovery rate, no good, right? Maximum mana. So that's a usable belt right there early on. We can craft on fire resistance. Boom, right? And this belt's probably worth a little something, right? I mean, maybe not a crazy amount because we're a little later into the league, but this is a very usable belt, 70 chaos, we'll say, and it took me 3 essences to roll. You see, so this is a very so there are times where and certain items where you'll pretty much try to always craft them because it will end up being cheaper than going and buying the item itself. That's just the way it is. And a belt is a prime example of that. Body armors, I prefer to craft my body armors because I feel like that's the same way. Doing certain things, or trying to find an item like this that has 1100 flat armor and evasion and big life and spell suppress is going to be expensive to find, right? So it's a little bit easier just to craft it and link it myself, okay? And now we kind of get into the end game currencies, which you typically won't be using until you know what you're doing, right? Divines, I almost never use divines anymore except for really, really end game items. Like if I were to craft a full tier 1 bow or something like that, I might divine it. Otherwise, I would only use it on uniques, maybe like Watcher's Eyes or a ring or something like that I was using that is expensive to purchase that would be, let's say, a Watcher's Eye that costs 10 divine, right? You're not going to go buy a better rolled one for 15. Maybe you throw 3 divines at it and try to get a slightly better roll, right? So I rarely use divines to actually for their main purpose. What we end up using them for is mods like this. Suffixes cannot be changed, prefixes cannot be changed, cannot roll attack modifiers, right? So you're not actually going to right click this and put it on there. You're going to come in here and use them in your crafting bench if you're going to use them for crafting, right? So, and these are all part of your end game. And obviously we could get really into this stuff. I kind of just want to touch on all these things and all these options, so that you have an idea. Your veiled chaos, this is typically what I use in conjunction with prefixes or suffixes cannot be changed, right? So the idea is that when you're crafting a high tier item, you are going to either start with your prefixes or you're going to start with your suffixes, right? So depending on what is more valuable to you. So in this particular case of my bow, right, I was looking for the plus 3 and damage over time. So I used this essence that guarantees my +2 to bow skill gems until I hit the damage over time. Now, one of those is a suffix and one of those is a prefix, right? So you can't use prefixes cannot be changed or suffixes cannot be changed. So what I ended up having to do is cannot roll attack modifiers on there, right? And this might not make a ton of sense. Again, I just want to go through these. So we put this on there for 1 divine, and then we slam it with an exalted orb. The only modifier that exists as a non-attack modifier on a bow is +1 to level of all socketed gems. So that guarantees that when we exalt slam, which exalt again being one of our endgame currency that will just add a random line to an item, it guaranteed that we got the +1, and then we can craft on the fire damage over time. And then you're like, well, it's missing a mod. All the remaining mods on the that are available are not going to be very beneficial to me. In fact, there are some in there that could even brick my build. So I'm not going to even try to craft on another line because it's not necessary. There's a potential to ruin my entire bow for not much payoff for the rest of the mods, right? So that's when you would use that. Sacred Orb, you're very rarely going to use. This re-rolls, as you can see up at the top of the item there, it says Armor 311, Evasion 311, but there's a range of 297 to 341, 297 to 341. Your Sacred Orb will re-roll that numbers for the base amount of Armor and Evasion. We can even just go ahead and try it right here. Hopefully I don't have to take out my sockets. Right, so we just hit 314. We didn't get much change, but that's what that one does, okay? And let's exalt slam on this ring. So we're going to take this and we're like, okay, we have 1 open prefix. we need life, and so we got mana, of course. So that's what an exalt does. There are other things you might do, like blocking mana to try to slam on, which is all more things. I just kind of want to show you the basics of all of these things, right? And then now lastly, your Veiled Chaos Orb. Is this a usable ring? No, probably not. Your Veiled Chaos Orb is a chaos, but it will add a veiled mod on there that you could come in and unveil. Now, typically you would not use it in that way. When you would use it is in the case of, let's say with you're crafting an item, you get all your prefixes in order, right? You have life. In this, you want, bow skills, or let's say this is exactly what you wanted, right? And you got damage with bow skills, lightning damage to attacks, and we'll just say life. They all hit, all three of them. None of them are crafted on, right? What you would do is you would go to your crafting bench and add prefixes cannot be changed, right? So you would add prefixes cannot be changed for 2 divines. So you definitely don't want to take this lightly, right? You want to make sure that you have your prefixes in order, or vice versa, your suffixes, and then you would do suffixes cannot be changed. What you would end up doing is then slamming it with a Veiled Chaos, and it would not remove your prefixes, right? Because the first thing it reads is prefixes cannot be changed. It would remove prefixes cannot be changed, add some random mods, and then a Veiled mod, right? So then you could go in there and get a really nice Veiled mod like crit chance, and chance to gain a frenzy charge on crit chance or something like that, right? So you can get a much more powerful mod depending on the item. Okay, so that's when you would use something like that. And then now lastly, the Val Orb is an interesting one because it's not one you use super often outside of mapping and stuff like that. But, you can go in and basically try to add an extra implicit to an item that normally... look, we got a couple of these in here. Let's brick one of these real quick. So you have a few different outcomes. We just got vulnerability. That actually might be worth something. So, okay, 50 chaos, 30 chaos, something like that. Not a huge deal, but that's an option, right? You can also brick it, but, now on these gloves, you have the option to hit with vulnerability every time you hit an enemy, and if you're a physical build, then, that's going to be really nice, right? However, the item now to modify it, whatever it takes, let's say you want to add more sockets to it, right? What you have to do now is you have to go to your bench. And if you want to add 2 sockets, whatever it costs in the bench, it costs an equal amount of Val Orb. So you're still able to craft on the item to a certain extent, change colors and do things like that, right? Change sockets, but it gets expensive and you need that form of currency to then be able to do so, right? And then just the last couple things, that there's a few other methods obviously used for crafting. You can use fossils, which I typically use the perfect often to try to get my items. As you can see, this item is a quality 30%, so that which will then in turn make it easier to link and things like that, and it will boost those base numbers. So I don't use these as often as I used to, but this is a good way if you're farming delve and stuff like that. You can use these modifiers or these fossils and these resonators to craft the thing that you want. You're like, let's say I want, and we can try one right here. We're going to do a life, and let's see, what do we have here? We want life, and we want cold resistance on this ring right here. So we're going to try for that with this fossil, and we hit this, and we didn't get any life, and we didn't get any, or we did get fire. So we got fire damage to attacks, right? But we wanted cold, right? So let's try this again. That seemed to not work at all. So let's do life. So we should be getting a life modifier, and we'll do a fire modifier, right? So we hit that, and there we got a life and a fire resistance. Everything else is random, right? So that's another way that you can come in and try to be like, okay, look, man, I don't need a crazy item right now. I just need life, and I need a little bit of fire res. Let's just hit this ring and see if we can get a couple nice mods, right? So fossils is another good way to craft, okay? You have your essences, which we went over earlier. Let's see, none of this is going to be crafting purposes.
And now your last method, which I do use fairly often depending on what I'm crafting, is the Horta crafting bench, which comes from doing the harvests, right? And these ones can be used again from beginning to end game. We won't get much into that. We're just going to kind of touch base. But basically, all it is whatever the corresponding currency is for the thing that you're looking for. We're going to be looking for fire modifiers. So we're just going to hit this, and boom, right away we get a fire resistance with a bunch of random stuff. Here we get a fire damage to attacks with a bunch of random stuff. Right, so there's a number of different ways you can do this, or depending on what you're looking for, and craft yourself an item. But as you can see, there's a lot of RNG involved in these crafts. So that's when, again, like I said, I'm going to finish the video the same way I ended it. The most difficult part about crafting is figuring out when to craft and when to just go purchase so that you don't waste your money. And that comes with time. Like I went over a few different things that I always craft for myself. I always craft my cluster jewels, and I always craft my belts. Outside of that, oh, and I'm sorry, I craft a lot of things. I always craft my body armors for the most part, unless I'm using a unique, obviously. And I always craft my weapons end game. I will typically purchase them or find them early, and then I will always craft them end game, because at the end of the day, if you know what you're doing crafting, it is better than buying. It absolutely is, with the caveat of mid game, the items that you're going to be able to buy from just someone who found something and just also needs 10 chaos is going to be better than what you're able to craft, unless you get lucky on like an essence or something like that. But mid game, when you get into white maps and stuff like that, and you're kind of trickling into yellows, I would recommend, you're like, man, I need new rings. I have 20 chaos. Don't craft with that 20 chaos. Just go buy yourself 2 rings that have a few things on them that you need. And then once you get to, you're like, okay, now I'm in red maps. Now I need real rings. I specifically need melee damage and fire damage and life and this and this. And you can go look, and you might be able to find what you need, but it might be better for you to start crafting at that point if you have the expendable currency. Okay. So as you can see, this it goes much deeper than that, but hopefully this will get you guys thinking a little bit about when should I craft, when should I go buy something, and et cetera, et cetera, right? So we crafted this for whatever 15 chaos probably, and it's worth 60 or 70, right? But again, it's time spent. Maybe you just want a map. That's another question you have to ask yourself. Some people don't really want to craft, they just want to play the game. You might be one of those people that will almost always buy your items, because you're like, I don't want to craft, I don't want to do this, I just want to go and run maps and run activities. And so it'll be easier for you probably to just go and buy it and be done with it, because your time is spent playing the game anyway. So you probably have more money than someone like me, who sits in my hideout a lot trying to craft and figure things out and stuff like that. So that's about it for this, guys. If you guys want to see a more in-depth, I am going to be crafting it's actually for my other build for my magic find. I'm going to be crafting an elemental bow soon, so I will put that up as a video so you guys can see, and that will be a real end game craft when we're going to be using a lot more of these items, and we'll still be using essences. Let me just preface with that: you will use essences to craft for pretty much the entirety of the game. Essences are very, very powerful, and that's one of the reasons why people farm them, is people want to buy them, right? So it's a good farm, it's great for crafting, and you will almost always use essences in some way, shape, or form throughout the entirety of the league, depending on what you're doing. So I will preface that essences are fantastic. Definitely use essences if you're farming them up. Sell the ones you don't need, use the ones you do. Now I want to just do real quick, kind of show you how we search for items, right? If you're looking for something specific, we go to pathofexile.com, trade. You want to make sure that you're in your correct league, right? Whether you're in hardcore, ruthless, whatever the case is, standard, wherever you are, right? Whoopsie, we don't want that. And now there's a multitude of different things here. But what we're going to do is we're going to just basically real quick, as you can see, we're going to go look for a ring. And this is where we put the modifiers that we're looking for, right? So here we want a ring with life, and these are explicits, right? I'm just going to explain these two things real quick. Pseudo means that it's looking for it anywhere on the item. It can be in the implicit, it can be an explicit, it can be whatever the case is. Sometimes you will use these, but generally you're going to want to use the actual, this is the actual modifier, the line added, number to maximum life, right? So this is what you're going to end up using most of the time, right? So we want life, and it can roll, let's say we want 70. We want a big, big roll. Now I am going to use pseudos here. This is one of the times that I do, is like we're going to look for a really nice ring with, we want try, resist, and life. So we're going to choose cold, fire, and lightning pseudo. That means it'll look for it anywhere on the item, whether it's in the explicit or maybe it's got a mod up at the top, the implicit for it to have, some of like a two-stone ring has 16% to fire and cold or something like that. So this will look for it anywhere on the item if it says pseudo, okay? It doesn't have to, this is a main line, right? This is the line max life on the item. It's not an implicit, it's not a synthesis, it's not anything like that. It's just that is, you're looking for life on the item. Now we can kind of put in values here, and we want 40 resists of all of these across the entire ring, right? And you come in and they're about a divine. So, right, so you have your life roll. It has lightning up here, you see, and then it has cold and fire down here, and then all elemental resistances. So as you can see, the pseudo looked for it anywhere. The max life only looks for it right here, okay? So these are our items, right, that we're looking for, and we're like, oh, like this one's pretty nice. We have a physical convert to lightning build, right? So maybe we like something like this, whatever the case is. But that's how you would end up searching for something like that, a very specific item, right? And then if you're just looking for, let's say you want a headhunter, right? And you're like, I want to buy a headhunter, but I want it to be rolled really, really well, and I don't want it to be corrupted. So there's a million other different settings in here. You can come in here and be like, I do not want to see any corrupted items, right? So now none of them in the list will be corrupted. But and you're like, okay, I need this to be max strength, right? What you can do is you can actually click on the modifier itself, and it will filter it based on that number, right? So this one is the highest one on the market for 170 divine. And then we can just kind of start scrolling down and seeing if we can find one that is a little more suitable, maybe a little cheaper, whatever the case is that you're looking for. Maybe you just flat out want that 66 strength and you're going to pay the 170 divine for it. You could also look for this modifier, or vice versa. You can look for the lowest roll to try to find the cheapest one, right? So clicking on the mod itself is helpful in trying to find what you're looking for, right? So again, I don't want to get, and then we will pop in a little bit over here. This is where you would buy and sell bulk currency, right? So let's say you want divines, you have divines and you want chaos. You could search that and you can come in here, and it's very simple to just, you contact them and it sends them a private message in game. It's very convenient. You can also look for, this is where I come buy all my scarabs, right? So I'm like, I need all my divination scarabs. I come in and this is where I buy them, right? So that's how you would buy and sell your bulk items, okay? And that's about it. I don't want to, I could make whole videos on this, and maybe if you guys would like to see it, that's what I should do. How I would go about, buying and selling and buying all the crafting materials that I need and stuff like that, because that typically takes me a considerable amount of time in and of itself, aside from the crafting and all the other things. So if you guys have an idea of kind of where I could segue into the next video for this, please let me know what would be most helpful to you, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll wrap it up there. I appreciate you guys hanging out and watching. I stream pretty much every day on YouTube, so come check it out. Like, subscribe. It's all very helpful, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace out.